It's an exciting day today because I just got my center stage field elements, so let's put it all together. Now, the first thing we need to do when we get something like this is do a full inventory of everything that is supposed to be in this box, because things happen. The boxes get damaged during shipping, things fall out, and we just need to check the work, make sure it's all there before we get started. It's going to be a bummer if we get halfway through building the field and realize that we're missing a critical piece, so we'll start with that. If you do have a box that you received that has some obvious damage from shipping, or maybe it got wet and part of the cardboard started to fall off and things might have fallen out, be sure to take a picture, or better yet, a video of the entirety of the box. So if you need to contact AndyMark or the shipping company about it, you can do that. Just gotta do a little bit of work to get into it. I'm never quite sure which parts of a box to cut when I'm opening something like this. Is part of it going to slide out, or should this come down? Always an adventure. There we go, we're almost there. There we go. Okay, and it's open. So the first thing on top is the backdrop, and we've got some paper materials and stickers from AndyMark. Thanks for sending stickers. I always appreciate when companies do that. It's just fun and I like collecting them. So as I said before, first thing we're going to do is an inventory, so I need to go grab my copy of the field assembly guide so that we can do that. Okay, so I have the field setup and assembly guide here with me. It is one combined guide this year. And the first thing that it has is a recommended tool list. Most of these tools are exactly the same tools that you get from the Center Stage tool set from AndyMark, which I go ahead and buy because it's just convenient to leave those special sets of tools with the field itself. So no matter who's transporting it, no matter who happens to be there when you go to set up the field the next time, you definitely have the tools that you need. So I like to keep those. We have those handy, as well as a utility knife, a tape measure, safety gloves, and some tape that we will need later. Next part of the manual starts with the parts list. So let's go through this box, make sure that we have everything. So the first part is the backdrop parts list, which is nice because the backdrops appear to be right on top. So let's start getting them out. We'll check them over for some damage, make sure nothing got hit during shipping, because if something did, we'd like to handle it now before the meets actually start up. I'm gonna pull them out. We'll just set them down here. I'm going to separate them gently. And just be aware that there's actually a piece in the top there that just fell out. So that is the actual backdrop front. Here we're looking at the backdrop back. There are two of them because there are two backdrops on the field. This is a full field set that we're looking at. And I'm just looking it over really quick, make sure none of the parts are obviously damaged or bent or anything like that. And as you're working through this, just be aware that there's a lot of stuff coming off these pieces. They were made in a workshop environment, so there's a lot of dust, there's a lot of plastic shavings and other things. So have a vacuum cleaner handy when you're doing this. The actual backdrop fronts, the thing that I was supposed to be pulling out without dropping it on the floor, they're not actually scuff marks, but they have some, they look like tread marks, to be honest. And that's okay, that's not anything that's going to affect how we use these for competition. They look pretty good, so I think we're good there. I'm gonna open up some of these small boxes. Actually, I don't think there's anything in this box. It looks like just a spacer. Hopefully that's intentional. We'll know by the end, once we count all the pieces. Yeah, looks like there is actually nothing in that box. It was just a spacer to keep things from moving around. So let's see, this one is not that way. It's definitely something inside. So I should be very careful when I'm cutting open these boxes because it is easy to cut something that does not need to be cut, especially if it's like a plastic piece like the backdrop front. Notably, AndyMark probably anticipated this problem, and all of the tape that needed to be cut was on the outside of the box, so you weren't taking a knife and slicing straight down the center where that backdrop front was, that would cause some damage and potentially affect the playability of those pieces. So be careful, don't just, take a machete to the front of it. Inside here we have all of the smaller parts. So we'll go through and count those separately in a minute. Let's count the peanut legs. We should have 4 of them for a full field. And it looks like these. Along with that, we have backdrop feet. And this is exactly the kind of piece that if the box got wet during shipping or something like that, maybe it got a hole in it, one of these might have fallen out. So it's important to count things like this. One of the problems you have when you're looking through this parts list is you don't have a sense of scale for some of the things. So this under tile bar, it does not have any measurements to it. It has a part number, so we could go and look it up if we weren't sure, but we kind of just have to guess to get started. I think what we're talking about looks like this. We'll see if I'm wrong. And I do only see 2 of them, so that's a pretty good sign. It says April tag 1, and it says that there are 1 of them. I'm going to assume that since the picture has a set of April tags, it's talking about this set. 3 for each backdrop, so randomization 1, 2, and 3 for each of the 2 backdrops. And it looks like they're labeled, so you can actually check the labels on these April tags too to make sure you have 1 of each. We're going to keep them in the bag for now so they don't get damaged while we're working on everything else. Okay, now we get to some of the more interesting metal pieces. So we have 2 of these interesting little pieces we have here. These trapezoid looking things are actually the apex brackets. We do have 4 of those, and these still kind of trapezoid, but they have that extra header on the top. That is the apex bracket in parentheses blocker. Now we're getting into the plastic pipes that are available. 3 of these short yellow pipes that go in the stage door. We're going to have, for a full field, a grand total of 8 of the truss long yellow pipes. 8 yellow, 2 red, and 2 blue. 2 red. They are the same length, they're just a little bit thicker. We have a pipe C-clamp. That's going to be a plastic piece. I think it is in this smaller box in front of me. Let's start going through this. Under tile peanut mount bracket. Looks like a domino piece, 2 on one, 1 on the other. Just a little bit of an angle on them. Going through some of these smaller parts can be a bit tedious, and this is where you might want to actually print out the first few pages of the field assembly guide, even if you want to save some paper, because it's very nice to be able to physically check off things as you find them, especially with some of the smaller parts where you may not immediately be sure which ones they are. If you find a large group of some and a small group of others, it helps you to just sort out which is which ones you've counted and which ones are still waiting to be counted, so you don't double count one and not count some of the others. Also, I'll be honest that when it comes to some of the bags of bolts and nuts and washers and things like that, I don't actually go through and count everything. It's going to be very obvious once we start putting things together that something is missing, and those are the types of parts that, if you have to, you can go to your local hardware store and pick something up. So I'm less worried about those. As long as I can sort of give a hand-wavy judgment, like, yeah, it kind of looks like they're all there. It's not obvious that, multiple bags of things are missing, and you didn't, for example, end up with a half field set when you expected a full field set, then I'm generally satisfied that everything's here and we can get started with the building. Now, one thing you are not going to go to a hardware store and buy are the pixels. So let's go make sure we have the correct count of those, because that is something that's going to be difficult to deal with if you show up on competition day, you're hosting a tournament, and you don't have everything you need. Now, lucky for us, the pixels are in these nice bags that make it easy to count through the initial inventory. And this is the kind of thing where I dream that after every competition, the pixels are going to somehow make it back into these bags, but I know that that's never really going to happen, so we don't have to worry about these bags too much. It would be nice if we could find some nice way to store the pixels in between meets so that we could easily count and make sure that we have the correct amount at the beginning and end of every meet. But we'll come up with something later. Since I did not take the time to physically print out the field assembly guide and I have not been physically checking things off as I go through, it's good to just, at the end, take one more pass through everything. Make sure you can remember setting eyes on each of the parts that you're seeing in the list, because chances are that's your best way to gut check that you have everything. If something looks unfamiliar after you've been through everything in the box, that's a good sign that you may not have it and you need to go look for it, or contact Andy Mark if it's not in the box. All right, so we've gotten through the initial inventory and the counts of everything look good. So it's time to actually get started building things.